When you hear the word propaganda, what comes to mind? Soviet posters? Nazi radio broadcasts? Maybe Orwell's Big Brother staring down from a concrete wall? But what if propaganda didn't die with the 20th century? What if it simply adapted? What if it learned to wear a suit and smile, to sponsor a study, to trend on your feed? Because here's the truth. In an age of infinite content and 15-second opinions, propaganda has never been more powerful, and most of us don't even know we're being fed it. This video isn't about wild conspiracies or shadowy puppet masters. It's about systems, incentives, narratives that benefit some and mislead others. So what exactly is propaganda? How does it work? And more importantly, who's using it today and how? Let's strip away the drama for a moment and define it clearly. Propaganda is information, often biased, emotional, or misleading, designed to promote a specific agenda, cause, or worldview. That's it. It doesn't have to be a lie. In fact, the best propaganda often relies on half-truths, selective framing, and repetition. Historically, propaganda has always been part of power. The Roman Empire used it to justify conquest, engraving their victories in stone. The Catholic Church used stained glass and spectacle to communicate with an illiterate population. World War I posters turned farmers into soldiers overnight. Totalitarian states weaponized it to control reality. Images of Stalin airbrushed history. But propaganda isn't just about what's said. It's about what's left out. It's about how it makes you feel, not what it makes you know. There are three main types. White propaganda. You know who it's from and what it wants. Think government PSAs. Grey propaganda. The source is murky, the agenda's unclear. Think viral posts, unverified leaks. Black propaganda. It lies about who created it, often to mislead on purpose. Think false flag disinformation campaigns. And in today's world, most of it is grey. And grey is where confusion breeds compliance. Propaganda used to shout from loudspeakers. Now, it whispers from your phone. We live in a narrative ecosystem built on clicks, speed, and engagement. And in that world, propaganda doesn't feel like coercion. It feels like consensus. Let's talk media. 6 corporations control the majority of news you read, shows you watch, and headlines you scroll past. In the US, that includes Comcast, Disney, Warner Brothers Discovery, News Corp, Paramount Global, and Sony. When that much control exists in so few hands, the diversity of voices becomes an illusion. You might flip channels, but the framing stays the same. Headlines aren't always designed to inform. They're designed to influence emotion, because emotion equals engagement. Engagement equals profit. A study by MIT found that false news spreads 6 times faster than true news on Twitter. Why? Because it provokes stronger emotions. And here's the trick. Once you feel something, you're far less likely to question it. The same goes for social media. Algorithms reward content that triggers outrage, identity, or tribal loyalty. It's not a conspiracy, it's just math. But the effect is the same. You get locked into echo chambers, fed narratives you already agree with, and slowly, the world outside that bubble becomes them. Even platforms meant for neutrality, like Wikipedia, are subject to editorial manipulation and paid editing, often by PR firms or state-sponsored actors. Let's talk about one of propaganda's oldest allies, war. In 2003, Americans were told Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. Newspapers ran front-page headlines. Cable news filled screens with maps, generals and flags. Politicians repeated the phrase like gospel, WMDs, WMDs, WMDs. But there were no weapons, and 20 years later, that war cost hundreds of thousands of lives. What made it possible? Propaganda, disguised as journalism. In Vietnam, the Gulf of Tonkin incident was exaggerated to justify war escalation. Declassified documents later confirmed the public version of events was false. Or consider Libya in 2011. NATO intervention was justified through emotional coverage of human rights abuses, but post-war Libya collapsed into civil war and open-air slave markets. The Western press largely moved on. Words matter. A fighter is called a terrorist or a freedom fighter based on who's doing the naming. We don't just go to war with weapons, we go to war with language. Now let's zoom into your grocery cart. In the 1960s, sugar companies paid Harvard scientists to blame fat, not sugar, for heart disease. That one move shaped decades of health advice. Suddenly, low-fat yogurts loaded with sugar were considered healthy. Fast forward to today, Coca-Cola funds research saying lack of exercise, not sugar, is the real problem. Processed food companies sponsor nutrition conferences and dietitian associations. PepsiCo sponsors educational materials for registered dietitians. Kellogg's funds studies that show sugary cereals improve attention in children. Mars invests heavily in studies promoting cocoa flavanols for heart health. Even Big Pharma runs emotionally charged ads about conditions you didn't know you had, until the solution just happened to be available by prescription. The CDC itself has been criticized for working too closely with corporate partners. And during COVID-19, narratives shifted constantly, not always along scientific lines, but along political and economic ones. Propaganda isn't always anti-science. Sometimes it's weaponized science. Propaganda has evolved beyond politics and product. Now, it plays on your identity. Brands take stances on social justice not because they care, but because it's profitable. Pride logos in June, radio silence in July. Rainbow capitalism isn't activism, it's marketing. Nike used Colin Kaepernick in ads while sourcing shoes from factories in China with alleged human rights violations. Gillette ran a viral campaign on masculinity, but its parent company sells razors with highly gendered messaging in other markets. We're told that certain questions are off-limits, that disagreement equals hate, that nuance equals betrayal. Social media mobs enforce conformity, not through argument, but through shame and cancellation. When language becomes a moral minefield, we stop thinking, we start performing. And that too is propaganda. Propaganda doesn't just target adults, it starts young. Textbooks omit uncomfortable truths about colonialism, slavery, or empire. National myths are repeated until they become unquestioned identity. In the US, textbooks in Texas versus California can have completely different accounts of the same historical event. In China, the Tiananmen Square protests are never mentioned. This isn't unique to one country. It's the default mode of state-approved education. When you control the past, you shape the future. So why is propaganda more effective than ever? Because we're exhausted, we're drowning in information, and confusion is fertile ground for manipulation. Propaganda doesn't need you to believe a lie. It just needs you to be too tired to question it. Add to that algorithms that reward your worst instincts, friends who shame you for not conforming, news that blurs facts with feelings. experts who speak with certainty about things still unknown, and you get a society that reacts before it reflects. Truth isn't hidden. It's buried beneath noise. The goal isn't to convince you. The goal is to numb you, to the point where you'll believe anything, or believe nothing at all. So how do you defend against something so subtle? You slow down. You ask questions. You follow the money. You resist the urge to choose sides before understanding stakes. You get curious when something makes you angry. You don't reject everything, but you don't accept anything just because it came wrapped in your team's colors. Ask who wrote this, who funded it, what's being left out. Use lateral reading, compare sources, learn who benefits. Propaganda only works when we stop thinking, so the antidote is curiosity. The most dangerous propaganda isn't loud, it's quiet. It doesn't march in parades or bark from podiums. It seeps in, phrase by phrase, image by image, until it becomes invisible, until it becomes normal. It tells you who to fear, what to ignore, who to shame, and who to follow. But truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to be seen. So next time you feel something strongly, pause and ask, who benefits if I believe this? Because at Reasoned Truth, we don't do outrage, we do nuance. And in an age of noise, that might just be the most radical thing left. If this made you think, consider hitting like and sharing it.